Born in the spring of 1942 in Chicago, John Wayne Gacy was an American serial killer often recognized as one of the most depraved criminals of our time. The son of Danish and Polish parents, Gacy and his siblings grew up with a drunken father who would beat the children when they would misbehave. He was regularly belittled by his father and often compared to his sisters, enduring both physical and emotional abuse leading well into his teenage years. Although John truly believed that he was never good enough to gain the approval of his father, he always spoke well of him and denied harboring any hatred in spite of the continuous abuse. Gacy suffered further torment at school, unable to play with other children due to a heart condition that was viewed by his father as one of John's many failings. Being an average student with few friends, he was an occasional target for mockery and bullying by neighborhood children and classmates. During the 4th grade, Gacy started to experience random blackouts. He later estimated that he spent almost a year in the hospital for these episodes, and attributed the decline in his grades to his time out of school. His father suspected the episodes were an effort to gain sympathy and attention, accusing John of faking his condition as he laid in a hospital bed. During the 1960s, he worked as a manager at a fast food chain and became a self-made building contractor. A few years later, John became involved in politics, working as an assistant precinct captain for a Democratic Party candidate in his neighborhood. In 1962, Gacy recalled his time working in Las Vegas, where he found work with the ambulance service before he was transferred to work as a mortuary attendant. He slept in a cot behind the embalming room and spent most of his time observing the embalming of dead bodies. Gacy later confessed to experimenting physical interaction with the cadavers, on one occasion that involved the corpse of a deceased teenage male, embracing and caressing the body before experiencing a sense of shock. Gacy was a respected figure in his community who organized a number of cultural gatherings while performing as a clown for charity events. In March of 1964, John became engaged to a female co-worker within the department he managed. After a 9-month courtship, the couple married and relocated to Iowa, where Gacy accepted employment as a manager for a number of fast food restaurants. Gacy later described this period of his life as being perfect, adding that he finally earned the long-sought approval of his father. On one occasion in July of 1966, John's parents visited him and his wife, where his father apologized for the physical and mental abuse he had inflicted upon his son throughout his childhood. As far as his parents were concerned, John had secured the respect of his father while keeping them oblivious to the double life that John kept hidden from his family. One that involved illegal gambling, pornography and drug use. Gacy was deeply involved in many of these activities and regularly cheated on his wife with local prostitutes. He was also known to have opened a makeshift club in his basement, where he allowed employees to drink alcohol and play pool. Although Gacy employed teenagers of both sexes at his restaurants, he socialized only with his young male workers. On the outside, Gacy had successfully created a persona that people could respect and admire, only to disguise the reality of his ruthless criminal history. In 1968, he was convicted and given a 10-year prison term in relation to the sexual assault of 2 teen boys. By the middle of the decade, 2 more young males accused Gacy of rape, and he would be questioned by police about the disappearances of several others. It was later discovered that he had committed his first known killing in 1972, taking the life of a young boy after luring the teenager into his home. On December the 11th, 1978, another young boy went missing. It was reported to police that he was last seen by his mother at the store where he worked as he left to meet with Gacy in relation to a potential job. On Friday, December the 22nd, 1978, detectives confronted John with the news that digging was being done under his house. With this, the monster finally broke down. He admitted to the police that he had killed at least 30 people and that most of the remains were buried beneath the house. He explained that he lured his victims into being handcuffed, and then he would sexually assault them. To muffle their screams, Gacy would gag them with a sock while sodomizing their lifeless bodies. He also admitted to keeping the corpses under his bed or stuffed in his attic for hours or days before burying them under the house. Meanwhile, the police discovered 2 bodies during the first day of the excavation. As the days passed, the body count continued to rise. Some of the victims were found with underwear still lodged inside of their throats, while others were buried so close together that investigators believed they had been killed, or at least buried, around the same time. By December the 28th, the police had removed a total of 27 bodies from John's house. Much to the discomfort of the local neighbors, the police were still excavating Gacy's property at the end of February. While workers began breaking up the concrete of John's patio, another horrific discovery was made. They found the body of a man, preserved into the concrete. The following week, another body was found. The 31st victim to be linked to Gacy was found in the Illinois River. Police investigators worked hard to identify all of John's victims, using dental records and other clues, and eventually, all but 9 of the young men were identified. A mass burial was held for these unknown victims on June the 8th, 1981. And while the investigation had ended, the trial of John Gacy was just beginning. With Gacy having confessed to the crimes, the arguments were focused on whether he could be declared insane and thus remitted to a state mental facility. John had told police that the murders had been committed by an alternate personality, while mental health professionals testified for both sides about his manufactured mental state. Ultimately found guilty of committing 33 murders after a short deliberation, Gacy became known as one of the most vicious serial killers in American history.
They arrived at the only proper verdict and the only proper sentence in this case.
He was sentenced to serve 12 death sentences and 21 natural life sentences. Though he had confessed, Gacy later denied being guilty of the charges, claiming that someone had framed him by planting the bodies under his house.
People don't want to know the truth and the honesty of it. If they want to be convinced or brainwashed into what they believe, then fine, then go ahead and kill me. But vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, because you will have executed somebody that didn't commit the crime.
Throughout his time in prison, John took an interest in visual art and put most of his time into his paintings that were eventually presented to the public at an art gallery in Chicago. John Wayne Gacy died by lethal injection on May the 10th, 1994. When he was asked for a final statement, John simply responded, "Kiss my ass." By the spring of 1979, his former home had been reduced to ruin. Once the remains of the house were cleared away, it became a vacant lot, and a continuing reminder to the neighborhood of the monster who had once been in their midst.